Hey everyone, another day, another handheld, with this one being the GameMT JellyMini E5. The E5 is a bit of a funky, almost square-shaped budget handheld, which floats around the $30 to $35 mark, depending on what promotions are on at the time, and doubles as a charging brick, although this is somewhat limited by its 5000 mAh battery, and it's available in white, black and purple colourways. In terms of specs, the E5 is powered by a VT569B CPU, which gives the E5 access to up to the PlayStation 1 catalogue, which to be fair isn't too shabby considering it's on a charging budget handheld. There's no mention or indication of RAM, I'm afraid, but it does have a 5-inch 16:9 720p display, which to its credit isn't too shabby. It's got the 5000 mAh battery, although some listings mention a 3600 mAh rated capacity mysteriously, and a Pandora-like Linux-based OS, all with a weight of 260 grams. In terms of first impressions, what immediately jumps out for me was the E5's circular D-pad. This is a bit of a funny one, as it's a circular plastic disc, which has a D-pad almost embedded into it, with a removable plastic disc on top. It's an interesting design choice, but unfortunately the edges of the circle are just too sharp for it to be comfortable without the discs for me. Otherwise, on the right side, we've got the volume and power buttons. On top, we've got a couple of the USB-C ports, headphone jack, mini HDMI port, and a micro SD card slot. On the back, we've got the crunchy clicky shoulder buttons, with a sharpish plastic divider between the two, and a kickstand, which essentially helps the handheld stand fully upright, which, considering it also has the HDMI out, makes it more of a shame for me that we don't have Bluetooth or Wi-Fi available with the E5. All in all, in terms of shell design, it's a bit of an odd looking but actually surprisingly featured shell. It's just let down by the bizarro D-pad setup and sharp bits of plastic used around its shell. In terms of controls, there's unfortunately no getting around the fact that the E5's otherwise competent controls are just completely let down by its D-pad design. Unfortunately, the removable disc setup gives you the worst of both worlds, with either somewhat more control but uncomfortably sharp edges with the plastic disc removed, or no sensor feedback or any form of control with the disc there. It's just not a good setup, and the E5 would be infinitely more appealing with just a decent traditional D-pad. The menu buttons are on the clicky side, but otherwise absolutely fine, and the face buttons are actually okay. Not what I'd class as good, but the surrounding circular indent to the shell around the face buttons actually work wonders for them not recessing too far into the shell, so despite them feeling a little loose overall, they're not actually too bad. The shoulder buttons are the crunchy plastic style that we've seen a few times on budget handhelds, and unfortunately the L2 and R2 buttons aren't raised at all, which make them pretty hard to find. But most frustratingly, the E5 is actually pretty comfortable to grip around, so with the improvements to the shell and a decent D-pad, there'd actually be quite a bit of potential here. In terms of firmware, we've got a Pandora-like OS that is very bare bones, but at least is simple to operate. It's got a list of all the ROMs. The included SD card is full of duplicates as a side note, by the way. Categories by system. A pretty accurate search function, which a lot of the budget handhelds don't have. A collection and history tabs, as well as bare bones setting menus. The operating system plays some super annoying background music at all times, which you'll want to turn off immediately. There's okay stock settings throughout, although NES music seems to play at least twice the speed, and the firmware allows you to use save states and minimally remap the controls. So ultimately, the stock firmware is bare bones, but could be classed as functional. And with that, I'll cut some gameplay now before summing up at the end. So ultimately, the GameMate JellyMini E5 is immediately let down by its disc D-pad. If it had a decent D-pad, it would actually be an alright low power charging gadget with the ability to play some games too. But for me personally, I just wasn't able to get past that disc D-pad. That's it for now though. Thanks so much for watching.